Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. And as it was mentioned, the title of my presentation is Why Interculturality, the Importance of Intercultural Competences in Higher Education. I'm from Colombia. This is a university located near Bogota, the capital city. It's actually in Chía. As you can see, it's like a little town near Bogota. South America, for those who don't know where Colombia is, it's located in South America. It can be confusing for some people, so I just mentioned it. It's a very important, and I want to share, it's a very important topic, and I want to share about the situation of this topic. It's a very trendy topic now in my country because it hasn't been explored in depth. It's surprising to me and to many language teachers that although we have a very varied cultural inheritance from indigenous communities and everything, it's not explored and it's not a topic of interest for many teachers and for many researchers in the field. So a little bit about what I'm gonna talk. The first thing I want to tell you about is the context of this study, the university. What is intercultural competence? I think we all know what this is about and all the questioned models that have been proposed. Intercultural education, because it's part of what I'm trying to implement in the university I work at. Intercultural competence at Universidad de La Sabana, the experience that I have been having, and the future. Something that interests me is how to measure intercultural competence related to the plenary or the keynote speaker we had this morning. It's a question to me because I haven't actually been able to find out a way or a method to measure how interculturally competent my students are. So let's start. Well, Universidad de La Sabana in Chía. It's near the capital city. It's a private institution. We have very varied programs ranging from education, child pedagogy, business, all kinds of engineering, and we have almost 8,000 students at the university. Specifically, I work for the Department of Languages and Cultures, and I'm in charge of the academic coordination of the minors, which are elective courses in English. The idea is that these courses are offered for all of those students who want to practice English and who are already bilingual or who are native speakers of the language, because we also have exchange students who come to our university. And the idea is to offer a space for these students to practice and to be able to share their culture and to share their experiences. Most of them are well-traveled people who have been experiencing with other cultures. So it's an opportunity for our Colombian students to share with those other cultures and for those people to enrich our knowledge with their experiences as well. In these minors, we have 5 courses. All of these courses have been developed through the course of more or less 4 years. These 2 courses, Exploring Customs and Traditions Around the World and Exploring the World and Its Natural Wonders, are the last 2 courses we have created. They were created last year, and they are mostly focusing on getting to know not only the culture, but also like those natural wonders that exist around the world, taking into account that we receive students from Germany, Vietnam, very different nationalities, Haiti, Venezuela, and these are the ones I can remember. That's the intention, like that we can explore not only the customs, traditions, but also like natural sites. The experience I'm going to share with you today, it took place in this course, Intercultural Studies and Local Identities. This course focuses on First, the main intention of this course when it was created was to focus on Colombian indigenous minorities and focusing on Colombian national identity. Why? Because we thought that the population we were going to have was only Colombian students, and that that was going to be it. And we wanted to highlight the values and the good things about being a Colombian. Why? Because as you know, Colombia has had quite a bad reputation in history, especially in the 80s and 90s with all the political and social crisis we had in our country. So when we created this course, the main intention was to highlight good things and to have our students be and feel proud of being a Colombian. Yeah, but through years, we discovered that this course called the attention of international students who came to our university. So we have shifted the focus a little bit so that they can also share the things that they feel proud of being a German, a Haitian, and different nationalities we have in the course. We also have a strengthening conversational skills, and the last one, which is intercultural studies and globalization, which is more focused on international aspects. In the title of my presentation, you could see that I'm asking, why is it important to become intercultural? Why is it important that students in a higher education level know what it is to be interculturally competent? Most of our students, or most of the students who take this course, are studying business, communication, and majors that will probably demand that they travel around the world, that they communicate with people from other cultures. So it's important that they are aware. It's basically about raising awareness on intercultural competence. This is not a subject, or it's not a topic that is included in many programs or in many language departments in Colombia. So that's mainly why it's an enriching experience for the language community in my country. What is intercultural competence? Well, this is the model I took for this particular implementation. I know it's been questioned, and I know it's been criticized in a positive way, but particularly when I was reading and when I was like getting familiar with the topic, I found that this was the model I wanted to use and my students to the goals that I wanted my students to reach. What is intercultural competence about? Interacting, or intercultural competence is about interacting effectively and appropriately. This can be very ambiguous depending on our interpretation with people from other cultures. Counting on specific attitudes, affective features, intercultural knowledge, skills, and reflection. I think it's important, or what I try to highlight when I'm teaching this course specifically, is attitudes and affective features. Why? Because if we compare the way a Colombian behaves and the way a German person behaves, it's really different. Yeah, and that was one of the things I wanted my students to be aware of, because with the topics we deal with in class, we could realize how different the perceptions were. So this is a very important aspect. According to Bennett, intercultural competence has 3 dimensions: a mindset, a heart set, and a skill set. If we talk about the mindset, we talk about the ability to understand similarities and differences of other cultures, and self and cultural awareness. How do my students perceive themselves? It's really important. Sometimes we think of ourselves as members of a group, and if I belong to a group, I should behave in a specific way. I don't think about what I feel, what I want to do, what I want to think, but more about a group. And cultural awareness, of course. Those specific features that characterize my personality or myself. The heart set, Acknowledging, appreciating, and accepting cultural differences. Something that I wanted my students to learn or to be aware of, because I think they know, but probably they are not just aware that they know it. Being different is not negative. If I don't like someone's behavior, or if I find it really different, it can be shocking at first, but it can also be enriching and fruitful for my experience. Self-esteem, self-monitoring, empathy, open-mindedness, reserved judgment, and social relaxation. These were some of the aspects I wanted to include in the design of the course. And the skill set, some skills my students should be able to have at the end of the course, or should count on at the end of the course. Intercultural agility, I like this term because it's the ability to reach communication goals with people from other cultures. Message skills, appropriate self-disclosure, I really like that one. Especially for Colombian people, it's really difficult. We're really open, and we speak, and we talk, and we hug, and it's different. So I think it's very important for my students. Behavioral flexibility and interaction management. So to sum up, on the definition that was included in the course, intercultural competence is people's ability to understand, appreciate, and adapt to intercultural interactions and situations. What about intercultural education? If I want my students to be interculturally competent, what kind of education should I, or what kind of pedagogy should I apply, or should I take into account while teaching my class? Intercultural education refers to a pedagogy, aims, content, learning processes, teaching methods, syllabus and materials, and assessment. I find this part quite tricky. Of which one purpose is to develop intercultural competences in learners of all ages in all types of education as a foundation for dialogue and living together. The Council of Europe, do you remember this morning? Yeah. Okay, so I think it's important that in Colombia, specifically in the South American situation regarding language learning, this concept is included. Intercultural education, intercultural pedagogy. Why? We are not taking into account the variety of cultures that are inside our country. We're gonna see in other part of the presentation, in another slide that is coming, the perception of students. Why? One of the topics was minorities, and inside minorities, not only around the world, but also inside the country. Why? Because my students became more aware of the fact that even if we have the same nationality and the same national identity, we can also be different, and we can also find enriching things inside the country, not only outside, because sometimes we think, okay, why do I need to become intercultural if I'm never going to travel? That was a question my students asked me. Why do you want me to learn about other cultures, learn about other customs, other traditions, if I'm not planning to travel, I'm not planning to visit other countries? And I told them, well, think about your own country. Is everyone the same here inside Colombia? Think about food, think about ways of talking, think about clothing, think about weather. In Colombia, we don't have seasons, but we do have all kinds of weather inside the country. Like Bogota is really cold, but if you go 3 hours, it's really hot, and then you can go to the coast in 8 hours, and it's all varied. So I was trying to find those reasons and trying to explain my students why intercultural competences are really important. Not only in higher education, this was an experience in a higher education institution, but also in all kinds and all ages and all types of education. If we want to plan a class for intercultural education, some aspects we need to take into account are experience, analysis, action, reflection, and comparison. We should take this into account in order to offer our students chances to experience, analyze, act, take action, reflect, and compare. This morning I was attending a presentation, and something that really caught my attention was the reflection part. Is it easy to reflect? Is it easy to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a reflective paper on how interculturally competent I am? I think it's a really difficult exercise if I sit down and say, okay, why am I interculturally competent? Or how can I explain that I am an interculturally competent person? It's difficult even for me as a teacher. And I think it's really important that for us teachers, that we teachers think of how interculturally competent we are in order to teach our students how to become interculturally competent. About the experience, this was an empirical study, a qualitative study. As you know, empirical studies are based on observed and measured phenomena, and it derives knowledge from actual experience rather than from theory or belief. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this is the first phase of the study. This was the pedagogical implementation, and it focuses on raising awareness and how my students somehow learned why intercultural competence is important for them, no matter their program or their major or their focus in life, their future plans. So, the experience and the participants in the experience were 6 university-level students. Different nationalities. We had Colombian, Venezuelan, German, and Haitian students. And different majors. We had medicine, industrial engineering, business, and communication students. Most of the students were bilingual or had a native-like language level. The methodology of the course was 4 face-to-face hours a week on a weekly basis and 1 online session. What was the idea? In the 4 face-to-face hours, I tried to provide students with input and concepts, important concepts regarding national identity, regarding intercultural competence, regarding culture. And in the online session, I tried to provide my students with the opportunity to discuss and to actually provide or give their view on the topics. This is more or less the design of the course, the syllabus. Some of the topics included defining basic concepts at the beginning. We just had what's culture, cultural dimensions, and Colombian society. To introduce, to open, because Colombia was it's the country where we are at. But then I had some room for the students who came from other countries to share about their national society. And I wanted to include some generating questions. Why? Because as a teacher, I asked myself, what do I want them to talk about? These were just some generating questions that I was wondering about, and that guided somehow the discussion. What are some dimensions of culture? How does culture vary from country to country? I don't know if vary is the correct word, that's why I have it there that way. Is culture learned or inherited? What are some traits of Colombian society specifically? And then I changed according to the nationality. Culture and identity, national identity, minorities. This is just the first part of the course. Indigenous communities in Latin America, and minorities around the world. Not only in Latin America here, but according to the students, this is a program that changes according to the needs of my students, so it's quite flexible. And I try to take into account what my students express while the course advances. It's not a fixed program, and I try, for this particular experience, I conducted a pre and post survey, an interview, and I also analyzed students' artifacts, what they did in class, their tasks, and the posts to the platform during the online session. This was the program for the face-to-face hours, and this is more or less how the platform looked. It's a Moodle platform, for those of you who know. Do you know what a Moodle platform works like? Yeah. So it's forums, basically, because I wanted my students to have the chance to discuss. So for example, this particular task was about national identity. I provided some instructions, and then students had the chance to talk about the topic. Oh, sorry, okay. So for example, the first task on national identity was to make a short individual reflection on the aspects you want to highlight and the aspects you want to change in your national identity to make a better society. So I asked them to highlight positive and negative and compare. Read 2 of your classmates' reflections. This was a very important part. Why? Because if it's optional, somehow they're not or most of them are not gonna read and reply to their classmates. So part of the instructions I had in the pedagogical implementation was to have at least 2 replies to other classmates and agree or disagree on what they wrote. Please make sure you use valid arguments to support your comments, like articles, like references, etc. So, for example, this is a German student. I would like to change that sometimes excessive correctness and discipline, which sometimes is useful but often prevent a more relaxed and comfortable atmosphere. I don't want to change it radically, but a little more Latino-ness. He created like this term. Would be nice. Furthermore, the common nagging is getting on my nerves and most of the time is contagious, which can easily create a bad atmosphere. He's a German student. On the other hand, I like the fact that if you get to learn Germans for a while, you can make really good friends who are honest, loyal, and helpful till the rest of your life. Besides, in many situations of daily or working life, it is pleasant and helps that people are generally punctual and stand to its promise. And a reply from a Colombian student. Well, I think trying to be right always is not necessarily bad. Actually, I'm impressed how German culture has climbed to the top of the more organized and wealthy. But what you say about being Latino-like regarding the way you can enjoy the little unforeseen mistakes or taking liabilities not excessively serious because you're young and you also have to enjoy your life. That could be a good way to create a link between these 2 countries that are thought to be different, form their fundamentals. I think she meant from. I analyzed all of these extracts, and as you can see, they can be more aware of the fact that there are positive and negative aspects in all cultures, and there is no better culture to say. From the survey, one of the students says, the most important ability regarding intercultural competence is to adopt the own way of life to the values and customs of another culture in terms of living in this one. Apart from that, getting in contact with any person, an intercultural competent individual knows how to behave, how to react, and how to talk, taking into consideration the cultural background of each person. In an interview, a student says, people can be influenced in their way of life, getting to know different traditions, attitudes, and opinions related to specific topics. A person can compare them and can combine, for example, different attitudes from a different culture to find a better way of life. Apart from that, people traveling around the world can open their mind, learn from other cultures, and get impressed by other cultural aspects. As I mentioned, this is the initial stage of the study. It's just the pedagogical implementation and preliminary results on the instruments that were used and analyzed. What is the next stage, and what do we want to do next with these courses and with this intercultural focus we want to implement at the university? Measuring intercultural competences, and it's a coincidence. It's not that I added this slide right after the keynote speaker this morning. Since an individual's intercultural competence can always be further enriched by experience, their proficiency cannot be assessed in terms of progress towards a finite goal. I wonder if it's possible to create a test that tells me how interculturally competent my students are. How can I know if they actually behave and react and adopt and adapt behaviors that are appropriate and effective, and all of the aspects mentioned in theory? It is their proficiency, the extent to which they are able to respond appropriately, effectively, and respectfully in an intercultural situation, which has to be measured or described. I agree more with the word describe. Why? Because if I face my students with intercultural situations, how do they behave? How do they react? I can describe that, but I cannot measure. And finally, assessment needs to include both analytical measurement, description involving multiple measures, not only one aspect, but multiple aspects that inform me in regards to how interculturally competent they are. Okay, so thanks a lot for your attention, and these are my contact details in case anyone wants to know more about the experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.